Imagine you're living in a place so safe, so quiet, that letting your 4-year-old child walk down the street alone feels like the most natural thing in the world. And that was Savannah, New York, back in the summer of 1993. Now it's the kind of tight-knit town where everybody knows your name. Doors are often left unlocked and kids ride on their bikes until the street lights come on. On the morning of 2nd August 1993, a local 4-year-old named Derrick Robbie, who was a bright, cheerful little boy, affectionately called the unofficial mayor of his neighborhood, gives his mother Doreen a kiss and says, "I love you, Mom," and happily hops down the sidewalk towards a nearby park for summer day camp, which was just 1 block down on the exact same side of the street. Now you guys might ask, what could possibly go wrong here? But looking back at cases like this, it always hits me as to how fragile our senses of absolute safety really is. Because we often get so used to the routine that we rarely even expect the world to shift on its own axis in a matter of seconds. However, when Doreen goes to pick Derrick up later that morning, she finds out that he never really made it. Panic sets in instantly. Search parties fan out across the sleepy town, combing through every inch of brush, parkland, and backyard. The hours stretch into an agonizing eternity until searchers finally make a grim discovery in a small patch of woods just yards away from the park. Little Derrick was found dead, the victim of a brutal, senseless attack. Savannah's innocence was shattered forever. Everyone in town assumes that it must have been a stranger, some transient drifter passing through on a highway, because nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to believe that evil could wear a human face they already recognize. The weight of that realization hangs heavy over the entire community, transforming a peaceful summer morning into the opening act of an absolute nightmare that no one could have ever prepared or even predicted for. The New York State Police assumed total control of the investigation almost immediately. Detectives interviewed hundreds of residents, searching for anyone who might have seen Derrick during the short walk from his home to the park. Because in a community this small, every conversation mattered, and nearly every resident became a part of the investigation in some way. When the investigators entered the wooded area near the park in Savannah, New York, they immediately realized that they were no longer searching for a missing child. They were standing at the scene of a homicide. Now, as the police investigate the gruesome crime scene, they notice some strange details that point to a mind which was far more twisted than a simple robbery gone wrong. The police later found out that Derrick's lunchbox had been tampered with. A banana was smashed and Kool-Aid was poured directly into his open wounds. Detectives also secured the area and began documenting every detail. Physical evidence indicated that the attack had occurred at the exact location, and investigators carefully photographed the scene, collected trace evidence, and searched for footprints and other clues that might identify the person responsible. The victim's injuries also made it clear that this had been an intentional and violent assault, prompting investigators to treat this case as a homicide from the outset. Because the crime scene was outdoors, detectives had to work quickly to preserve the evidence before weather or foot traffic could compromise it. For a time, detectives believed that the killer was likely an adult predator who had encountered Derrick on his walk to the summer recreation program. That assumption shaped the early investigation until the interviews with local residents, including a 13-year-old boy named Eric Smith, gradually redirected attention towards an unexpected suspect. Investigators had went on to interview the local kids who were at the park that morning, including a 13-year-old boy named Eric Smith. Now, Eric has bright red hair, thick glasses, and prominent low-set ears. He stands out, but not in a good way. Honestly, when you look at the early police footage of Eric, it's chillingly surreal because he doesn't look like a monster from a horror movie. He simply looks like the kid sitting 2 rows ahead of you in middle school science class. Eric goes on to tell the police that he had seen Derrick walking towards the park, but claims that he did not interact with him. However, when investigators walk the area with Eric and ask him to point out where he stood, the distances and lines of sight don't match up at all, which made the police suspicious that he clearly knows way more than he's letting on. Now the pressure mounts, and within a few days, Eric breaks down in front of his family. His father recalls the heartbreaking, shocking words he utters. "I'm sorry, Mom, I'm sorry. I killed that little boy." When the news breaks that a 13-year-old local boy is the killer, the entire nation stops dead on its tracks. Because how does a 13-year-old child commit a murder so violent, so calculated, and so dark? Parents across America look at their own teenagers differently, wondering what hidden thoughts might be lurking behind closed bedroom doors. The trial eventually became an instant media circus, locking horns over a deeply unsettling question that society had never truly had to answer before. Can a child truly be evil, or is it a deeply broken environment to blame? During the 1994 trial, a deeply troubled picture of Eric Smith's life starts to emerge. Defense attorneys started to paint a vivid, agonizing portrait of a boy who was relentlessly and cruelly bullied by his peers because of his appearance, his speech issues, and his academic struggles. Eric was a prime target for the schoolyard tormentors. Psychologists later even testified that he suffered from explosive rage disorder, directing all his pent-up, helpless frustration outward because he had no healthy emotional outlets. Now it also makes you wonder where the safety nets in our society actually are. Because when you push a kid to the absolute brink day after day, sometimes that pressure cooker has to blow up, though it can never excuse taking an innocent life. During later parole interviews, Eric himself would admit a horrifying truth, in which he admitted to grabbing Derrick in the woods, and he wasn't even thinking about a 4-year-old as an individual person. In his wrapped, fractured mindset, he was acting out in vengeance against the bullies who had tormented him, feeling a twisted, temporary sense of power because, in his own words, he said, "Instead of me being hurt this time, I was hurting somebody else." Now, the prosecution, led by District Attorney John Tunney, argued something even more terrifying to the jury, that Eric was fully aware of what he was doing and that without intervention, he wouldn't have killed again. The jury agreed. They found him guilty on second-degree murder, and the judge handed down the maximum sentence available for a juvenile at that time, 9 years to life in prison. At just a delicate age of 14 years old, Eric Smith was locked away behind a maximum security wall, becoming the youngest murder defendant tried as an adult in New York State history. Now, for nearly 3 decades, life goes on outside prison walls while Eric grows from a freckled-faced 13-year-old boy into a middle-aged man behind bars. He spends his time in various facilities, from juvenile secure centers to adult maximum security prisons, like the Clinton Correctional Facility. Every couple of years, he stands before the parole board facing Doreen and Derrick Robbie's tearful, unchanging grief. For the Robbie family, time doesn't heal all wounds. It just teaches them how to carry on an unbearable weight. Doreen once shared that when people ask how many children she has, she replies, "I have one boy here at home, and I have one boy waiting in heaven for me." Now, it's one thing to follow a true crime case from the safety of your couch, but it's another thing entirely to realize that victims' families serve a life sentence of emotional grief, while perpetrators get decades to read, reflect, and eventually grow old. Now, year after year, parole board members look at Eric and deny his release, nothing a lack of genuine remorse early on, or ruling that he still possesses a potential risk to public safety. But as we all know, prisons change people, or at least they give them a very long time to figure out how to present a rehabilitated image. Eventually, Eric goes on to earn a college degree behind bars, maintains a clean disciplinary record, and eventually finds a fiancée who supports his bid for freedom. And as the years tick past into the 2020s, The legal landscape surrounding juvenile offenders shifts dramatically across the United States, placing heavy emphasis on adolescent brain development and the possibility of rehabilitation. Now, the question here isn't just whether Eric committed an unforgivable crime. Everyone knows he did. The real question is, after 28 years of incarceration, does a man who committed murder at the age of 13 deserve a second chance at life? Or are some attacks so profound that they permanently forfeit the privilege of walking free? In October 2021, after the 11th appearance before the parole board, the unthinkable happens for the Robbie family. Eric Smith is granted parole. On February 1st, 2022, at 42 years old, Eric walks out of the prison walls a free man, settling quietly into life in Queens, New York, under lifetime parole supervision. The public reaction is explosive. Protests erupt in Savannah, New York. Prosecutors who put him away decades ago publicly call his release a high-risk gamble, arguing that a crime of that magnitude should carry a permanent debt to society that time alone cannot erase. And so we are left with the ultimate grey area of justice. How would we balance the undeniable capacity for human rehabilitation with the permanent shattered wreckage left in the wake of a senseless crime? For Dale and Doreen Robbie, the release brings a fresh wave of media attention they never even asked for. Though Doreen firmly declares that she refuses to let Eric take up any more space in her head, she doesn't focus on where he lives or what he's doing, because her primary focus has always been keeping the bright, beautiful memory of 4-year-old Derrick alive. The story of Eric Smith and little Derrick Robbie remains one of America's most haunting cautionary tales, a chilling reminder of how a single summer morning can alter multiple lives forever, leaving a small town, a grieving family, and a nation to wonder if true closure is ever truly possible, and if we are simply forced to learn how to live alongside the permanent scars of our past.